Hello everyone, my name is Christiaan van Hemert and this is the second episode of Q&A with Christiaan, a video series in which I answer questions that were asked by members of the Rosenberg Academy. The Rosenberg Academy is an online gypsy jazz guitar school which you can find at rosenbergacademy.com. Today I want to answer some questions about right hand picking technique. So let's start with the first question. What is a rest stroke and why would you want to use it when playing on a gypsy jazz guitar? A rest stroke refers to the technique we use to play notes on the guitar, either on the gypsy jazz guitar or when you're playing gypsy jazz, even on other guitars. It describes the motion of the pick when playing notes. We can look at it in more detail in a minute. But the reason to use it in gypsy jazz is because it gets the best possible sound out of these acoustic guitars, and also the sound it produces is associated with gypsy jazz. So by using rest strokes, you'll fit into the style immediately. So let's look at the rest stroke in more detail. Rest stroke refers to the technique of the pick resting on a string after you play a note. So for instance, if I play this open D string, then the pick would rest on the G string after I play the note. As opposed to a free stroke, which looks like this, right? And it's a different motion because in a free stroke, the pick moves from almost behind the string to in front of the string. In a rest stroke, the pick goes straight through the string. So when we talked about rest strokes, we only talk about downstrokes, because the upstroke in gypsy jazz is still a free stroke. Now the rest stroke gives a fuller sound, a richer sound out of the guitar. So that's why we try to play as many of those downstrokes as possible. Now let me give you an example. I will play a slow melody and I will first use only free strokes, downstrokes, and then afterwards I will do it with rest strokes. Now with rest strokes. So you can hear that it sounds warmer, fuller. Now, the rest strokes literally would mean that you pick rests on the next string, but it's more about the motion. So I could make a rest stroke without actually resting on the next string. If I would do this. Right? Maybe it would touch the next string, but I'm not resting on it. And also on the high E string, if I go straight through the string, it's still considered to be a rest stroke or a rest stroke motion instead of What's the best right hand posture? That's a very difficult question to answer because there are many great players with different variations of right hand posture and they all seem to work really well. So the only thing I can tell you is my vision on right hand posture based on careful analysis of some great players. So what I use and why I use it. But before we do that, I want to talk about some important principles of technique, of posture, of movement. And that is that every posture you learn or try to learn, or every movement you try to make, or every technique, should all be based on relaxation and flexibility. So that translates into a couple of important principles. First important principle is that your joints, starting from the joint in your wrist and your fingers, maybe even your elbow, they should always be relaxed. So I would stay away from any technique or posture that requires you to assume a kind of position in which you have to tense your joints, right? Either the joints in your fingers or the joints in your wrist. They should always be relaxed and ready to move if necessary. By tensing up your joints, by locking your joints, you will end up with a posture or technique that will result into pain at one point in your life, and that will result into injury. So always keep your joints relaxed. Another principle is flexibility. Every movement you make should be based on flexibility rather than force, right? If you want to play a note, maybe you want to play loud, you can either force the pick through the strings or you can be flexible. Think of a golf swing or a tennis serve. You can either hit the ball very hard or you can train exact movements that make use of your flexibility, of rotation, of gravity. So keep those things in mind, and then let's go to the other camera to look at posture in more detail. So the first thing to mention is the way I hold the pick. The pick is held between the fleshy part of my thumb and the side of my index finger. And you should experiment with the position of the pick on your index finger. It can be really deep or it can be more like this. Doesn't really matter, whatever you prefer. Then I have the biceps of my arm on top of the guitar, just really relaxed, and I drop my arm like this. Now notice the position of the wrist. My wrist is slightly bent. That's not because I'm bending it, that's because it's the most natural position for the wrist to be in when I have my arm and hand relaxed. So don't try to bend your wrist like this. I see a lot of people trying to bend their wrist. It violates the rule of relaxed joints, and also if you do this for many years, you'll probably end up playing with a lot of pain in your wrist at one point in your life, or you will even possibly injure it. So I would advise against it and just have a relaxed posture, and then your wrist will be bent anyway. So then look at those two fingers, my pinky and my ring finger. They are bent, all my fingers are bent, and they rest on top of the guitar, brushing the top, and we call this an anchor. It's not a fixed anchor, it moves with the hand while I'm playing, so it doesn't stay in one point. So if I play something now, you can see that it moves. And the reason for me to have an anchor instead of a floating hand, which is also a possibility, is twofold. The first reason is that I like to have contact with the guitar with this hand as well as the left hand. Because if I would play with a floating hand, then the only thing touching the guitar would be the pick. And I like the feeling of the guitar under my hand. Also, it facilitates playing the rest stroke motion on the high E string. Of course, there is no next string to rest on, so what happens if you're not careful and play with a floating hand, then your pick could land on top of the guitar, like this. And you hear this annoying tick. So by having this anchor, it serves as a barrier between the pick and the top of the guitar. It actually stops the pick from hitting the guitar. Okay, now let's talk about the middle finger. So all my fingers are bent, so the middle finger is also bent. And I see a lot of people, they play with a kind of straightened middle finger, or they start like this and then during the solo it starts to extend. I had the same problem. If you watch some older YouTube videos of me playing guitar, then you see that it starts to extend. And the reason that you shouldn't do this is that an extended middle finger also violates the rule of relaxed joints, because if all fingers are bent, then the middle finger should also be bent. That would be most relaxed. So the way to get rid of this habit is just focused practice every day for 10 minutes. Watch your right hand and force yourself not to make this movement. How to develop the technique of consecutive downstrokes. This is a question I get all the time, especially by members of the Roseberg Academy. Because if you look inside the Academy at the solos that Stochelo plays, and then look at the transcriptions, you will immediately notice the crazy amount of downstrokes that he uses. Sometimes he uses 10 downstrokes in a row. But there is a technique to this, and I want to discuss the technique in detail. And I also want to discuss all the other movements that are possible within gypsy jazz picking. So let's switch to the close-up camera of my right hand and discuss all those movements. After analyzing the right hand of a lot of different players, gypsy jazz players, so not only Stochelo but others as well, I found that there are 5 basic movements to gypsy jazz picking. Number 1 is downstroke, number 2 is upstroke, number 3 is sweeping, downstroke sweeping to be precise. Number 4 is double downstrokes, consecutive downstrokes, starting with 2 downstrokes. And number 5 is changing strings from an upstroke to a downstroke. So to start at the top, downstroke, which is a rest stroke, which I've already discussed. But let's go into the mechanics. The stroke is made mainly by the wrist, but because the wrist is bent and not on the guitar like this, so then it would be really down. It's more of a wrist rotation, but just a slight wrist rotation, just enough to push the pick through the string. You can see a slight wrist rotation. So when I'm doing it, I'm actually not thinking about the wrist, I'm thinking about my thumb. And I imagine the thumb to push the pick straight through the string. And when I do this, I automatically make the right movement with my wrist. Now for the upstroke, it's the other way around. I imagine my index finger pushing the pick upwards through the string. And remember, it's a free stroke now, so I'm not trying to rest on the next string, it's more from behind the string to in front of the string. So a downstroke followed by an upstroke for me would be thumb, index. Okay, the third motion is downstroke sweeping. That's when I play consecutive notes on low to high strings. So let's say I have to play this A minor arpeggio. Then I would just push with my thumb the pick in a continuous motion through the strings. Right? All rest strokes. So now my fingers in my left hand stay down, but I could also do it with lifting the fingers. So the right hand motion is the same, but because I lift the fingers after the note is played, it sounds like separate notes instead of. Okay, that's the third motion. That's quite an easy motion. The fourth motion is the motion where people get into trouble. It's consecutive downstrokes. I call it double down. Let's start with just 2 in a row. So the technique changes from all rest strokes. The trick is to make the first downstroke not a rest stroke, but just half of a rest stroke. So it's not really a free stroke like this. It's the motion of the rest stroke, but the moment you've hit the string, you move the pick up again. So don't make the complete rest stroke, but just pinch the string, a little pinch. And you do this twice in a row, with the second one being a rest stroke. And then you can see the motion very slowly. Again. You could also think of it as that the first note is kind of a circle. I play a note and I circle back to play a rest stroke. all made by the wrist, but again I'm thinking thumb. So this is on one string, but let's say I have to skip a string, so I'm playing the D string and then followed by the B string. I couldn't sweep because I have to skip a string, so then I will do the same. Little pinch. But now I don't have to make this circle motion because I can just keep moving down, but I do the same thing. I play half of a rest stroke, then I have time to skip the string, rest stroke. So now let's do a more difficult scenario. I have to play the D string followed by the A string, which is on top. So then I'm going to have to make the circle motion now, but I have to make it even bigger to be able to play the A string. But it's the same thing. Half of a rest stroke, circle motion, A string. So, let's say I have to play, let's do that. So it would be half of a rest stroke, so a very small movement, circle back up, next note, circle back up, rest stroke. So that's called half, half, full or something. Half rest, full rest. Let's do 4 in a row. Right, slowly. You can also hear that the last note is louder, which is part of the whole thing to think about. Just play those first 3 notes really lightly and focus on the last note. Okay, I'll go into an exercise to develop this later, but that's the 4th movement, and then the 5th movement is having a upstroke on one string and then changing to a downstroke, which is actually really easy because that would be index and then thumb. Right? It's easy on 2 strings that are next to each other. If you have to skip a string, you have to use your arm to move your hand to the next string. Let's say I play this high E string, low E string. So I would do index, arm, thumb. So those are the 5 movements. I'd never change strings on an upstroke, right? Some people like to play downstroke on one string and then upstroke on the next string. I never do this. If you do that, you have to add a 5th movement. Most gypsy jazz guitar players actually don't do this, although lately there's a new crop of players that do this and make it sound very convincing, so that's your choice. Are there any rules about when to use upstrokes or downstrokes or any stroke really? Well, I'm going to say something that might shock some of you. No, there are no rules. There are so many possibilities and different players prefer different ways of playing. For example, if you take a look at Stoffel Rosenberg's way of playing, he prefers to play a lot of downstrokes, especially on ascending arpeggios, so that you get double downstrokes on one string. When most people would prefer to play up and down, to alternate between up and down strokes on one string. And when I started out learning this style, I followed the strict rules that I found in Stoffel Rosenberg's playing with all the downstrokes, and I managed to do it, even though it was very difficult. But then, later on, I found that there are different ways, alternating or maybe even starting with an upstroke, which I still don't do. And I experimented with those picking patterns, and now I found a mix between all those things, whichever works for me. So the point is to be consistent. If you find a certain picking pattern for a lick or phrase that is comfortable to you, then practice it that way always, and also when you're in a jam or on a gig, play it that way, because one sure way to mess things up is to come up with picking patterns on the fly. Of course, if you're very experienced, you can probably do that, but especially in the beginning stages, settle on a certain picking pattern and stick with it. That being said, I want to go into some exercises that will develop the different picking patterns, picking possibilities. Let's go to exercise 1 of 5. So for each exercise, I will tell you what the exercise is for, and I will give you a demonstration of the exercise, and then I will tell you some key points to look out for. So this is exercise 1, and this is an exercise to train your down and up stroke. So the thumb, index, thumb, index. So this is how the exercise sounds. You play this pattern. One more time. So you play this on each string. So first on the high E string, go to the B string, go to the G string, so slowly. So always do these exercises with a metronome. Just start slowly, maybe 2 notes per beat. Then you can try 4 notes per beat. And you can move up in tempo. The goal is to do it, to be able to do it at this speed. So the key points to look out for are that you are really making the movement only with your wrist. So for me, again, I'm thinking thumb, index, and that if you move to another string, of course, then you need your arm to move, especially if you have to move to the lower strings. That's no problem, but the movement of picking is made with the wrist. Another thing this exercise trains, and that's important, is coordination between the right and the left hand. Of course, you can have a great picking technique, but if you cannot have the same speed in your left hand, it's no use. So this exercise starts you off on the path to coordinating between both hands. So one more time. If you have the problem with the extending middle finger, this is also a good exercise to watch your right hand and make sure that your middle finger stays with the other fingers. Let's go to exercise 2. Exercise 2 adds the movement of double downstrokes to your down and up strokes. The exercise on 3 frets. You play 3, 2, 1. Then you move to the next string, 3, 2, 1. Next string, 3, 2, 1. And then one more string, 3, 2, 1. And then you move 1 fret up, again on the E string, same thing. So slowly it would go like this. Now we're on the 5th fret, now we go back down again to the 4th fret. 3rd fret. End of exercise. So use a metronome, and these are all triplets. So 3 notes per tick. Start slowly. So some key points are that the 3rd stroke of each pattern is a half rest stroke to move to the next string. So we start with a rest stroke, upstroke, half rest stroke, next string rest stroke, half rest stroke. So it's important to make the notes even. You cannot do this. No, it has to be continuous notes, continuous triplets. Also, when you move to the next fret, you have to make a big movement from this note to this one. It's also a half rest stroke. Only thing is you don't have to circle back up, because you can just continue with the movement. Now you have to circle back. So do it slowly at first, and this goal speed can take a couple of months even. So, but do it slowly, and then once a week try to crank up the tempo to see how fast you can do it. Okay, let's go to exercise number 3. The 3rd exercise is combining rest strokes with consecutive down strokes. So you play on the first 3 frets, you start on the D string, and then you play 3, 1, 2, 1. All rest strokes. Then you do the same thing on the next fret, but the other way around. So and back up, it's up, and then half rest strokes, half rest again, and then you do a half rest again, because you start again with a downstroke on the next fret. So at the end of the upwards pattern, you get 2 downstrokes on the same string. And the first one should be half downstroke. So I would do it until, doesn't really matter, but you could do 8th fret, or you could even do 10 frets. You can do it slowly with a metronome. So this is the first variation. The second variation would be to play after the upward pattern, to play the next pattern starting with an upstroke. So like this. So instead of doing a half rest stroke, we do a full rest stroke, and then we start up on the next one. It's good to be able to do both. So either with a double down on the D string, or with down up. So let's do double down again, slowly. down up. So the important thing is, when you do this slowly, to also do the half rest strokes. It would be, if you would be in a concert situation, you would be playing this lick, if you can call this a lick, and you would be played slowly, then it would be logical to do all down strokes, all rest strokes, because it's slowly. You would maybe do, because you have time to do it. But the exercise is meant to be played fast in the end, so when you play it slowly, you should do it the same as you would do if you would play it fast. So half rest strokes when going up. Now all half rest strokes. So the end goal would be it's a tough exercise, but it will be really helpful. Let's go to the fourth exercise. The fourth exercise is about practicing only half rest strokes. Maybe you could make this also the third exercise. It's your choice. The exercise is on 3 frets again. So you start on the D string, on 2nd fret, then you play the 1st fret of the B string, then you play the 3rd fret of the D string again, and then again the 1st fret of the B string. So you get this. Sorry. And you do the same thing, you move 1 fret up. Maybe until 7th fret, then you go back down, start, but then you turn around, you play 3, 1, 2, 1. So every stroke should be a half rest stroke. There's no time for rest strokes because you have to skip strings every time. It's a good idea to play this on different strings, but always skip a string. So now I played it on the D and B string, but you could also do it on the G and the high E string. Or on the low E string and the D string. So that's the first variation. The second would be to play it with a rhythm. So you play 2 slow notes, 2 fast notes. Also a tricky exercise, but do it slowly at first, like this tempo. Pay attention to the motions, maybe the circle motion back up. Right, really slowly until you can do it at a reasonably fast speed. Okay, let's go to the last exercise. So the fifth exercise and final exercise is about combining rest strokes on the highest 3 strings with an upstroke on the E string, going back to a downstroke on another string. So it's on 2 frets. I bar the high B and E string with my first finger, and I have my second finger on the G string, 2nd fret. And those fingers I keep those fingers down during the whole exercise. So step 1 would be to play up on the high E string and then play 3 rest strokes, starting on the G string. So. So just do this. So I change frets on the upstroke. So I play up, rest, 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 up. You can also play it a couple of times and then move up frets. So the important thing is to make all the notes as even as possible. It's very difficult, but use a metronome and try to play, well, maybe it could be 16th notes, but try to make them as even as possible. So try to avoid this. No. So if you can do this, then you can add some interesting left hand movement. Maybe you could do. So I do 3, 1, 3, 1 on the 2nd fret, my 3rd finger. And then you can move that up in frets. So the goal speed would be maybe. So it's very difficult to keep the notes even, but that's the exercise. But start slowly and then just speed up gradually. We've come to the end of the 2nd episode of Q&A with Christiaan. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. It helps the channel and helps me stay motivated because it's very satisfying seeing that subscriber number go up. And I will be back in 2 weeks discussing left hand voicings in gypsy jazz rhythm. I got a lot of emails asking me about the left hand in gypsy jazz, about the specific voicings that are really suited to gypsy jazz. And if you have questions for me, please don't hesitate and send me an email at rosenbergacademy.com. Later.